I was not ready for this chapter. Coming off the ending of the last one, I knew going into 1159 that there was a very strong chance we'd be starting the God Valley portion of this flashback and get to see all of our heavy hitters related to that day land on the island, or at the very least be one more chapter of setup away from it, maybe two. But even with going in with that mindset, I still was not prepared for just how much we learned in this one chapter about this historic event. I think the thing that caught me the most off guard here is the whole Garling situation. Because look, don't get me wrong, I knew he was a dick. What we saw of him in the current day shows us that much, and I imagine he was even more so in his younger days. But I don't know, call me stupid, but I foolishly thought that after the ending of the last chapter that maybe there was some good in him. I mean, a celestial dragon, a god's knight no less, choosing to have kids with a non-world noble, and not only not forcing her into slavery, but actively letting her live a seemingly good life on her home island, that had to be a sign that he had a heart buried deep down somewhere in there. But no, turns out he's as much of a dick as we thought he was. Actually, correction, he's worse. And nothing exemplifies that more than the fact that the first thing we see him do in this chapter is give his unnamed partner hope that he had come back so that they can be together, and that the four of them can officially become a family, only to proceed to stab her right through the heart. In front of their kids no less, there's no redeeming that. Though I will say that maybe he does still have a bit of a soft side, because despite definitely having the power to do so, he didn't finish the job when it came to killing her. She does manage to crawl away, being found much later by a young dragon at the end of the chapter, but based on the wound she has, we're probably looking at her final moments here. And after reading this chapter, I can safely say that out of all the members of the Gorosei, Garling is the one now at the top of my shit list. Looking forward to whoever ends up fighting Kim, brutally beating Kim to a pulp. It's weird that it seems to keep being the one in charge of science that really brings out this desire for me to see them meet a tragic end, but at the same time, it's really only been those two that we put much focus on. And look, this might be wishful thinking, because I honestly think the story is heading in a direction where he'll end up exiting it before Garling does. But after reading this chapter, I would like nothing more than for Shanks to be the one to put his dear old dad in the dirt at the end of this, as a sort of revenge for what he did to his mom, who he might or might not even know about. The other person I would gladly accept stepping up to the plate would be Dragon, who had a very prominent role in this chapter. Honestly, at first, I didn't even realize it was him. I had honestly missed the giant text box with his name on it because I was too busy trying to figure out if I recognized the two Marines he was arguing with. Answer to that is a solid no, but if you do, let me know in the comments. But getting back to Dragon, you could definitely see just how much he was struggling with his role in this, recognizing right away that this wasn't right. Because these people weren't pirates or dangerous criminals, just ordinary citizens who were being kidnapped from their homes by the people whose job it should be to protect them. And I think the only thing that let him go on with this whole thing for as long as he did were the facts that he was using tranq darts, so he wasn't actually killing people himself, and the fact that as low as he was on the totem pole of the Marines, he had no idea what was awaiting these people on the other side of this. Hell, going into it, they told him it was a training exercise, so really only the higher-ups had any knowledge of what was really going on. But I imagine that finding Shanks and Shamrock's mom at the end of the chapter will definitely be his breaking point, because it's very likely that she'll end up dying not long after she begs him to save her kids, and I don't see him being able to continue to follow orders after watching someone die basically in his arms. So I fully expect that the next time we see him, he'll be trying his best to stop this whole thing from going down. Though the only thing I think he's going to be able to do is rescue Shanks from Garling. Not Shamrock, obviously we know Garling ends up with him, but somehow, someway, Dragon will manage to get Shanks from him. And you know what? I just had a wild idea. We know that Roger found Shanks inside a treasure chest after they left God Valley, and we know that at least some of the chests on the island had devil fruits in them. So what if Dragon put Shanks inside of a chest that had a devil fruit in it, and then ate the fruit in order to keep someone else from getting it? Someone else like Big Mom or Kaido, who we know were both actively on the island searching for powerful devil fruits. I don't know, to me at least, this seems like the easiest way that if Oda intends for Dragon to have a very strong devil fruit, for him to get it. But devil fruits aren't the only prize available in this hunt, as we find out that one very beautiful former empress has been kidnapped by the World Gov. And look, I think we all saw this coming from like the second Shaky entered this story in the flashback. Oda was just putting too much emphasis on how attractive she was and had basically every man in the world foaming at the mouth over her. It was really only a matter of time before the Celestial Dragons took an interest in her too. Though I will say that Garling was not the one I expected to be so keen on making her his wife. I thought that would go to some nameless, gross-looking world noble. In fact, he's so invested in taking her as his bride that it's implied that he's the one who personally infiltrated Pirate Island in order to kidnap her, killing Don Marlin in the process. Which it's so sad to see such a beloved character killed off screen. I'll never forget the huge impact he had on the story. And we can see just how heartbroken over his death the rest of his crew is. But Shaky being kidnapped does sort of mirror the whole Jenny situation, because just like with her, no one knew where she was taken, and it wasn't until the hunt started about a year later when they finally found out. Ironically, thanks to Jenny leaking the info, which a very young Big News Morgan also helped leak to Pirate Island, after being paid off by Cyberpol to do exactly not that. And speaking of leaking, Wang Zi is looking like he's about ready to spring a leak each time we see him in this chapter, making me think that perchance he's the traitor we've been looking for. And if he was, then that adds a lot more context to Blackbeard's part in the whole Rocky Port incident. Anyway, I know some fans weren't happy with the idea that Rox's reason for going to God Valley, where he ultimately would end up falling, was due to Shaky, but I will say that I still feel like rescuing her was more than enough reason for him to go. Even ignoring the other reason that we learned about in the chapter, the fact that the World Gov came to his island and kidnapped someone who he considered a friend is not something that he should easily let slide. Not if he's openly hostile towards them, and especially now that we know a member of his crew was killed in the process. So getting back at them for that should be more than enough reason for him to risk taking them on. And I honestly think that had he known where she was being held prior to God Valley, he still would have made a choice to go after her and take them on, even if it meant he might end up dying. Though, no matter when he left, I bet the World Gov would have still sent Harald to intercept him, as we see him do in this chapter. And I'm actually pretty blown away by this section of the chapter, because I was not expecting to reveal that Rox's real name was Davy D. Xebec. Though it does make his last line to Emu make so much more sense now. Honestly, up until now, I just kept the idea of Davy Jones existing in the One Piece world as something of a joke. Because if I'm remembering right, his treasure was something that Buggy was very devoted to finding, you could even call it his dream, and since Buggy was involved, I kinda figured it'll be something played up for gags later on. Like maybe later on when he does eventually find a treasure, that it's not something valuable enough to warrant the amount of effort he put into finding it. But I guess after this reveal, and the obvious reveal that Blackbeard is also a member of the Davy clan, that I had to start putting more time into researching the pirate, both in the One Piece lore and the real world, as he'll definitely have some level of importance going forward. Oh, and I guess the fact that surviving members of the Davy clan live on God Valley is what Shamrock found in the last chapter. But surprisingly, it's implied that he didn't know that Xebec had moved his wife and kid there. I mean, I guess it still could be a trap set up by the world government in order to lure him out, but Xebec says that he doesn't think they'd risk him crashing the party with all the very squishy celestial dragons there, so I think we could take that at face value. Now, after dropping this huge bombshell on him, Rox and Harald do have one final clash before the crew head on to God Valley, mostly to keep up appearances for the World Gov who were monitoring the giant at the time. But it is sad to think that this is the final time the two would see each other, especially since Xebec is actively asking for its former friend's help, not in overthrowing the World Gov, but in saving his family. And despite how much he personally would have wanted to help, Harald still chooses to side with the World Gov in this, stuck with the mindset that they are his people's only path forward. Once we shift focus back onto Harald in this flashback that was supposed to be about him anyway, I hope we really get to see how the news of Xebec's death hits him, and if that's what caused him to do whatever it is he does that gets him on Emu's bad side. Because, gonna be honest, the more I see of Harald in this flashback, the less I start to like him. I mean, I get how he could be so revered by his people, because they only see all the effort he's putting into improving their lives, but we as a reader get a much more in-depth look at his choices, and it's getting harder and harder to defend them. But that's a topic for a future chapter. This one comes to a close with the official start of the God Valley hunt, with Dragon's betrayal on their horizon, the two fiercest pirate crews and Garp on their way to the island, and our first look at baby Blackbeard. And this is literally just the beginning. We still have so much more to cover of this historic event, so much that it's honestly making me both excited and nervous to see what's coming next.